My first job, picking berries. I was in 4th or 5th grade, and in Oregon, it's a big farming area, and I started off, my parents put me out for the summer picking berries in the fields. It's good. I've pumped gas, I've worked at 31 Flavors before, you know, I've had all sorts of fun jobs. So, there we go. We're going to talk and break down this stuff. What I've been told is that you guys want to learn about my journey and path. I'll stop along the way on that journey. I'll talk about some projects that inspired me, some things I learned from it. I do have 2 case studies at the very end. If we have time, I can dive into like really deep case studies. But right now, it's more like, here's the things I did, and here's some things I learned along the way. Okay? So, Nike. I was an undergrad at Oregon State University. Beavers? No. All right. So I was in the engineering school there for 3 years, dealing with fiber optics and 3-dimensional calculus and just a bunch of stuff that I wanted to just scream. I was not happy doing that. And I turned over to the College of Design at Oregon State and spent an additional 2 years in college, so I was on the 5-year program. And one of my professors that really resonated with me, and we formed a closer relationship, as I was getting close to graduating, he was able to call up a former graduate of Oregon State that worked at Nike, and with that one phone call and that one relationship, he got me an internship there for the summer. Towards the end of that summer, I was offered a job. But this is before the dot-com crash happened. This is before 9/11. The economy was just bustling. And my parents, for graduation, gave me an open-ended ticket. And here I am sitting all summer. I'm working at Nike. This is great. This is awesome. But I wanted to experience something different. And different than what Oregon had to offer. Most people in Portland, most designers and creatives, have worked on Nike at some point, whether they've been there on campus or through an agency. So it wasn't anything really special. And so my parents gave me an open-ended ticket to New York, and I took off. But while I was at Nike as an intern, I was blown away by the campus, which is this gorgeous, almost college university campus. The architecture there is beautiful. I spent majority of my career was in this building called the Mia Hamm Building, female soccer player. If you take that building, turn on its side, it's taller than any of the towers in downtown Portland. Not to say that downtown Portland has huge towers, but we got buildings that are 40, 50 flights, so they're decent size. And that's that big arc one over there off to the right. But this campus is gorgeous. Off to the far left over there is a forest. There are deer that come on campus. There's its own ecosystem. There's otters that go through creeks. It's just absolutely amazing. Phil Knight is big on leaf blowers. There's not a leaf anywhere on the ground. It's beautifully gardened and gorgeous architecture. Some of the things I always talk about is they have this track field. And I love running, I'm a big runner. And that summer, I would spend every single day out there, and they would have Michael Johnson, people know who he is, come out oftentimes and coach at noon. And you could go out there and get training for running and track and stuff. So I would do that, and the track field was amazing. It has a forest in the center of it. So there's no like football field. And it's just an amazing run. But anyways, the campus is gorgeous. The food is gorgeous. You can get your hair done there. You can have beers there. They've got multiple restaurants. Everybody has bikes that go across the campus, and it's just a wild, wild experience. So that is that. Oh, I do have one story. So that center area is Ronaldo Field. And the building on the lower side of it is the Tiger Woods Center. On the far side is the Lance Armstrong building. One day, Phil Knight and Tiger Woods have kind of like a company day, and you can come down at noon and hear them speak and stuff. And there's a little putting green on the edge of the Tiger Woods side. And on the far side is the Lance Armstrong, or was named the Lance Armstrong building, gym. And it has glass that's going all the way across. And Phil, on a microphone, leans over to Tiger Woods and says, "Here's a golf club. I want you to break the window on that over there." So here we are, on the crowd's all on the grass right there. And here's Tiger Woods just whacking balls over there and just zinging them right off the glass. Couldn't break it, but it was pretty damn memorable. Anyway, great, awesome experience and stuff, but I took off to New York. And I work for Lippincott. Lippincott is probably one of the most well-known brand design firms in the world. And when I say in the world, it was only about 80 people when I was there. But most Fortune 100 companies do their branding through that organization. So to get that job was a ton of luck. Again, a college professor had a relationship that had a relationship into that. But I flew out there and I interviewed at Ogilvy and Mather, MTV, Gray Advertising, a bunch of different places. And then I met with these guys, and their whole analysis and planning and research side of the business, about half the staff was like Harvard and Yale, like MBAs. It just blew my mind that they were just doing so much upfront homework to define the work that was going to happen. So before pen hit paper, as far as a designer starting to create, we really understood the target audience, the growth drivers, the competitors, the personas, the consumer journey, everything. And that really moved me. And so I got the chance to work for these guys for a couple years. Lippincott is in the Bloomberg building in New York City off of Park Avenue. I lived off in Brooklyn, took 3 trains there, it was an hour sardined in there. We had 2 floors in there. It was a beautiful space. Above us was the Charlie Rose show. If anybody remembers the Charlie Rose show, I think it's still around, but oftentimes I'd see like Mel Gibson riding up the elevator, which was super weird. He's got crazy eyes. So Lippincott was a trip. And my first project there was working on a project for BMW. I was working on a project for BMW. It blew my mind. Like, are you kidding me? Here's this kid that was picking strawberries, a decade prior, out there designing stuff for BMW. None of my designs got picked. I was the junior designer, so there's that. But I got a sketch for a while. It was pretty cool. And I got paid to generate ideas based off of research. That was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. So, lots of late nights, lots of weekends spent there, a lot to learn. Another project that I really enjoyed, that I'll probably never have the feeling ever again, is to work on a really dilapidated airline, which is Northwest Airlines, if you guys remember those guys before they got bought out. But the feeling of seeing a plane land with your new artwork on it, logo, or a project that you've been a part of is exhilarating. The very first time I saw that hit, I just sat there and just felt like the luckiest guy that I knew, anyway. Okay, so case study. Quick case study is on Nissan. So I got to work on the Nissan dealerships nationwide. And Nissan was struggling with becoming the imposter syndrome. They were the 3rd Japanese auto manufacturer, and they were just felt like the cheap commodity versus Honda and Toyota. And so the people over there set a creative direction, and this kind of philosophy of creative direction is very similar to what Nike does as well. But they crashed 2 words together, and you couldn't separate these words, and those words defined everything they did going forward. It was their lens, their filter, it was their positioning, it was their creative direction. And those 2 words were bold and thoughtful. You couldn't pull those two things apart. They had to be brought together for everything. And that started with the Nissan Xterra, which is the car back there. And that was the very first car that came out that direction. If you guys recall, the kind of stadium seating that it had, the kind of more aggressive shapes that it had, they were separating themselves from that third Japanese auto manufacturer. So here I am, one of 5 people that's on this team. I'm the only graphic designer that's on this architectural project. I'm on there with 4 other architects that are part of the brand team, and we're given this idea of bold and thoughtful. How do we visualize this idea of bold and thoughtful in retail? So this would be the system of retail dealerships that you see nationwide. And they're still out there. I'm sure that you guys have a Nissan dealership here in town that looks very much like what we ended up doing. But my idea was, whoops, my idea is not Adrian Peterson. That was weird. Okay, we're back. So my idea was, if you could have a huge red wall, that'd be very bold, but the idea of thoughtfulness is a huge wall that could anchor signage, but it was glass, it was transparent, and gave good light on the inside and stuff. And I thought I had this amazing idea, and I flew down to Dallas-Fort Worth with our lead architect. I'm sitting inside of this focus group behind the black glass, listening to people, and some dude in the back is like, man, I just want to take a BB gun to that thing. And they got wind of that one little sentence right there, and the design died. But I was still part of the team going forward, so I wasn't fired for that. But my idea never really came to life, but I did get to work on this. And this is the dealership system from an architectural design perspective that you see nationwide to this day. And the idea of what we did there is, it's really about the guiding your eye and turning those corners and using kind of the hit of red judiciously, right? Just in a very well-designed perspective that guides where you should be, and it's not loud and in your face, but it's still bold, right? So that is one that's in Portland. And I think that design system still fits the brand to this day pretty well. So that's a project. So that was Lippincott. 9/11 happened, and I took a train from Penn Station down to New Orleans over to San Diego, back up to Portland. Spent a couple weeks on the road, and then got back into Nike and stayed there for another 11 years. So I'm going to briefly talk about that. I really had 3 jobs there. I worked in brand design for about 4 years. Brand design is, it deals with all of the retail, so the Nike factory stores, I worked on Nike Town, Chicago, Honolulu, San Francisco. It works with branding of athletes. Marion Jones, Lance Armstrong are some of the ones I got to work on. But the project I'm going to show you, I also got to work on the brand guidelines for Nike, which I still can't believe that I got to be a part of this project of distilling down the proliferation of almost 79 different iterations of the logo that had been brought to life across the brand, and to build out the guidelines, which they've probably blown up since this point. But another project I got to work on. Sorry, I didn't remember all the slides I put in here. I had a lot of energy this morning. This is a really cool project. So I was in New York when 9/11 happened. I lived off in Brooklyn, and we had a company party at Lippincott the night before, so I was honestly hungover. And I just remember on the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, just these sirens going off. And it wasn't anything abnormal to have sirens going off in New York City, but it was just a parade. And so finally, I opened up my windows, and here's one of the towers smoking. And I was supposed to be on a train on my way to work at that point that would have gone underneath those buildings. So it was always something that really, touched me. And to come back to Nike, and what Nike did right after 9/11 is they ran across the nation to create awareness. And they sent their staff out there, like 12 guys that kind of did like a relay across the states. And there's one point when they're out in like cornfield, like Kansas or something like that, and a fireman in full gear gets out with the 2 Nike runners, and he ran across. And so anyways, I took this crappy little JPEG from a Canon Digital Elf, if you guys remember those, and drew this scene right here. And then basically the whole circle talks about the different cities and quotes that came all the way through as we went from Astoria, Oregon, which is the tip of Oregon where the Columbia comes in on the Pacific Ocean and drives all the way across to New York. And I went back for another project I had recently, and that thing is still there 20 years later. This is in the Bo Jackson athletic facility. Not formerly known as the Lance Armstrong one, that's a different one, but that one's formerly known as Lance Armstrong. But yeah, it's still there. It's beaten up quite a bit, but it's on the ground in the gym as you walk in. And it's something I'm really, really proud of to have had the time to kind of commemorate something that I felt really passionate about. Okay, so case study. Nike is super famous for breaking the rules and not necessarily sponsoring the Olympics. In 1984, there's a classic like Harvard case study where if you asked anybody who sponsored the '84 Olympics, it's Nike, but they didn't. They just took over LA. And so they took over all the billboards and they advertised everywhere, and everyone came away with like, oh, that's the sponsor, but they didn't pay the sponsorship fee. In 2004, I got to work on the, before that, but the 2004 Olympics, I got to work on tying together the entire brand. I was on a small team. Maybe it started off with about 3 of us, and then it grew from there, and then agencies got involved and stuff. But I got to be a part of the direction. I was a junior designer working underneath some really talented people, and we had to come up with how we're going to talk about the Olympics but not talk about the Olympics. So we tied together a campaign called Speed. So I was given the word speed, and then the apparel, footwear, and equipment designers came together and thought about how we're going to tie together all the footwear, the apparel, and make sense out of it. And they had this inspiration that was given down to us on the brand side. And it was moving. It was obviously the red stripes, so speed stripe, right? So that started to make a lot of sense. But I was really intrigued by that image up there. And what I liked about it was the shadows. And I liked how you had these points that were vanishing. And you know, a straight line isn't very moving, but a line that has an angle is. And you can make just a gorgeous pattern. So I spent like many nights there, I spent just playing around, and I think it was actually Macromedia Freehand at that time, if anybody remembers that. It's another version of like Illustrator. And I drew this, and it's this kind of exploding lines coming out. And it's just was something that I showed it to one of our art directors, and they were like, oh, this is kind of cool. We think we can build something from this. And then like one thing led to another. And it informed the entire global campaign. It informed retail, it informed everything. And so it was fun to be a part of a kernel and given time to explore. So we started looking at photography. How can we bring this to life? And so we started building these sets, and you'll see that that's carved off foam core up there that we started playing with. Like, how can we, brand our photography of our apparel and footwear and athletes and stuff? And of course, then we started like, well, how can we bring in athletes? So we hired this model from LA that was a police officer, came up, spent a week with us, basically did burpees all day long until we just about killed this guy, trying to figure out how do we image this thing. We're like, oh, no, got to move the foam core. Oh, and then we started playing with acrylic and trying to cut acrylic. That's a mess. But this is all before, we didn't really have the tools to sit there and do this in CGI or 3D. This is real stuff. So the shadows, the reflections, everything is just, in my view, I see it and it's like, it's so gorgeous. I'm sure that, a lot of people probably don't appreciate it the same, but I just love all of like that center line going through there where it's just like kind of ghosted back where he's frosted. It was a lot of work to get that going. So this informed like dozens of athletes went through this. There was that same police officer there doing burpee after burpee. But you can see, you can't see it on this screen so well, but you see his reflection of that back hand in there. It was just such a stunning, gorgeous, beautiful, moving imagery that I saw people, and I certainly just spent a lot of time dwelling on it. Very beautiful. It informed what we did with retail, so you start to see the red stripe being brought in for different events and environments and what retail could look like, and of course digital and all the apparel. And here is some of the finished shots. So this is all acrylic that has been cut and formed around these things. And then at that point, Lance was the guy, right? Yeah. Pretty cool stuff. Months of tweaking, months of obsessing to get the right reflection and the right amount of that stuff in there, hung with a fishing line. And it was over in the Meehan building, and we had our own photo studio that usually is just dedicated towards doing, white shots of like shoes on a white background. But we busted out that area, and for months we just sat there and just worked on it. A lot of fun. So the story here is, when you're young, both of these jobs that I had, I worked my rear off. And I was there nights and weekends. I had a sleeping bag. They had a lot of air conditioning I was in the Jerry Rice building at that point, and they just pumped that stuff in at night. But I don't regret it. I don't regret it at all. I was just enjoying my life and enjoying my craft, and I love doing it. Okay, somewhere along the line, both my parents are PhDs. We didn't grow up rich or anything like that. They're professors, so a lot of education, a lot of student loans, but it was just kind of an expectation that I'd go on to grad school. And as I started looking at what I wanted to do, I had a short stint at RISD. I don't know if you guys saw that. I didn't really like that idea, and I wanted something that was more diverse, and I wanted to learn something new, and so I went and got an MBA. And when I got an MBA, I started getting really intrigued with how design really affected business. How could you measure it? And there isn't a better place in the world, in my view, than moving over to product design at Nike. So learning how to be a part of those teams where a color is the difference between 30,000 units sold and 200,000 units sold. So one quote that's always stuck with me, 60% of the acceptance, not a quote, this is the study, 60% of the acceptance or rejection of a product is based upon color alone. Color blocking on shoes, there's a whole science of that. It's pretty interesting. Okay, so footwear design. I got to work on a lot of stuff. That was 6 years of my life. I worked in men's running and track and field and Olympic shoes. I got to work in ACG, which is the all-conditioned outdoor kind of brand. That's a vegetable dyed leather there. The outsole can be tossed in your garden, it will go away. And we were working with unifying together the entire best practices for all of footwear companies, not just Nike. A lot of fun working with Adidas and Columbia Sportswear. I got to play around with just cool shoes, and this right here is boxing shoes for Manny Pacquiao. Anybody knows him? I've done all sorts of stuff for the running, the ACG, athletic training, but today, and I've worked with a bunch of athletes. You probably know these guys. This guy right here is pound for pound the best athlete in the world in my view. All right. Oh, and I got to work with Bo Jackson, who's gained some weight up in the upper left. But I drew this for him and worked on his shoes over there, and I just thought it was kind of cool. He likes Star Wars, so there we go. So case study, Air Force Ones. Anybody know the Air Force One shoe? Okay. So I got to work on that, doing color, graphics, and material, and then kind of potato heading this shoe together. What was interesting is at that point, Nike was a $10 billion business, primarily off of sports performance footwear. So footwear that is for runners, that's for basketball players, that's for cleats and soccer and stuff like that, right? Performance. Over the next 7 or 8 years, all of the growth that took them to $20 billion at that point was really through lifestyle product. And it was all of like the more fashionable stuff that you see today. And the birth of that was this Air Force One guy. It's really interesting. So the Air Force One is, in my view, a blank canvas for storytelling. The kind of the famous rappers have come in and have done stuff with them, but it was a strategy with retail on price points, distribution, limited distribution. It would go only into really boutique shoe stores in Harlem or Baltimore or Philly to gain credibility. Exclusive colorways with limited runs that would gain energy and would be written about. There was no marketing dollars for this. By about 2007 or 8, it was about a $2 billion slice of Nike's profits was one shoe, one silhouette. So color, graphics, material was the innovation. That's all it was. It was telling stories. This is a collection of The Untold Truth, Negro League baseball. Beautiful stories that in Kansas, there's a museum that we got to partner with to bring to life these stories and kind of pay respect to a lot of the athletes and their stories and the teams that were there before they were more integrated into Major League Baseball. Color, reason to buy. So this shoe proliferated in small increments across the nation, but in every respect, it's like it's a t-shirt game. It's posters. If you could just imagine that. It's a blank canvas for telling stories, and it did a really good job of that. I think we probably killed it in like 2009 or something like that, but it's still very, very big. But it helped introduce an entire category of taking old product and making it new. So some of that kind of creative direction stuff we talked about earlier, the bold and thoughtful. Nike, it's modern classic. If you think about really their product, their voice and tone, no matter what category you're in, that kind of, it lends itself really well to kind of their ethos. So that was cool, a lot of fun. Got to work with a lot of athletes, a lot of artists, musicians on this, and a culture that I really wasn't a part of. And I think the reason why I was successful was because I wasn't. It was because I was uncomfortable, but I was also curious. So, blank canvas. Last job was Nike ID, so I had an opportunity to leave and take all that brand experience I had and the footwear experience and go over to Nike ID. Does anybody not know what Nike ID is? Okay, Nike ID is you can go onto the website and you can customize your shoe with color graphics, outsoles. If you're a kicker, sometimes you want to have for football, you want to have a soccer boot on one foot and then you want to have a football cleat on the other one, or maybe you want to have a 4-foot like strap or a different density of outsole. All of those innovations as well as self-expression can happen on that site, and they also do it in retail. So it was a great opportunity to go in there and work on a variety of different things from the product to the site to retail. But I have lots of stories to go with this, but I'm going to keep this one short because I know we're running probably out of time. But what was really interesting about this when I first got in there is there was 13 million people a day hitting the website. The average dwell time was 9 minutes. The sell-through is 0.005. It's just kids getting on there, coloring up shoes, taking screenshots of it, and then sharing it across social media, right? Well, we just thought like, hey, it's just an innovation. It doesn't need to be, it can't be improved. It's just a toy, right? Well, through UI and UX design, which is really where I started learning about that, and to plug Adobe, their XD today is a phenomenal tool for that. But we really started thinking about what people wanted and needed. And I'm a big believer in immersing yourself to do research, immersing yourself in a culture, immersing yourself in an industry. My belief of focus groups is focus groups are to validate an idea that you have, but if you're looking to generate ideas, going to museums, sitting at retail, looking at consumers, talking to consumers informally, without an agenda, without a set of questions that you're trying to baseline, just being genuine and curious and letting the conversations take them where you want to go. So what I saw was often at Nike Town, New York, they had the Nike ID like room. You can go in there. They have like samples of leather and colors and swatches and stuff for you to choose and use and to get an idea of what your custom shoe would be like. But what happened every single time is people would grab the all over white shoe sample, set it down, then they'd walk across the store and grab a shoe that's already colored up, come back, set it down, and then they would color that shoe up and change one thing. People didn't want to have a blank canvas. Let me give you a stat. If you have a bodega in New York and you have 37 heads of lettuce, you will sell less lettuce than if you have 3 heads of lettuce, 3 different types of lettuce. So the point is editing things down for consumers is the right thing to do. Not always giving them options or too much or saying too much. We all know this from a design perspective, less is more, right? So we changed the design and we gave suggested colorways, and that's what you see on the site to this day. That changed their business fundamentally. When I left, that thing was $1 billion of the Nike portfolio. We still had the 13 million people a day hitting it, staying an average of 9 minutes. The sell-through is 2%, up from 0.002 to that. That happened overnight just because of the design. So when you guys are asking for raises and you're looking to charge if you own an agency, like what's it worth to hire a really good creative? What's it worth to have a creative go out and sit in your retail and just stare at people? It's worth a lot, and you should get paid for that. All right, I could tell you a lot more stories from Nike, but I want to get on real quick because I'm sure that I'm probably out of time. So I've been at Lippincott, Nike. Oh, yeah, there we go. So in 2012, my dad was dying of cancer. My wife is having her first child. And quitting my awesome senior creative job at Nike was a great idea. So I'm kidding. I quit. I resigned. I stayed there for an additional like two or three months, finishing up a project and kind of weaning off. And I spent, I don't know, 6 or 7 months with my dad before he passed away. At the same time, I was starting to freelance. And I didn't really know that I would have a company. I had ideas. I had actually put together an LLC in 2008. So I had one. It's called WB Creations with my sister, Watson and Bachman. So I started freelancing. I'm like, I need a better name than WB Creations. So I just found a URL, Watson Creative. I didn't think this thing would ever be anything. I highly recommend that if you have your own agency, don't name it after yourself. Stupid idea. I always hate answering the phone. Yeah, this is Matt Watson from Watson Creative. But anyways, I started this agency, and one thing led into another, and it's been a tough ride. The first 3 years, I had zero idea of what I was doing. I still, don't really have an idea, but I really didn't have an idea then. If I can give any advice to somebody that wants to start an agency, go work for another agency. Don't go from client side to starting an agency. It's horrible. I had no idea. But I survived, and somehow, like, we've grown all the way through this pandemic, and we're doing well, so I think I'll be doing this for a while. Okay, so I started Watson, and I think we're about 25 people now, give or take. We have writers, directors, videographers, illustrators, designers, of course, web developers, basically full service on staff. We're a boutique. My deal size is between that 20 and like 40. In there, I feel like I still have control of every single project if I need to influence it. I really trust my team. One of the things, if you look at my staff, we're really seniored compared to a lot of other agencies. The majority of my team is probably 40 or over. They've had 20 years of experience, 25 years of experience. They're still, I think, very much in the top of their game. But it's not like a lot of agencies, or some agencies, where you have like 2 or 3 people who are the partners and then a very junior staff. So most everything gets done by pretty seasoned individuals. I also started some other businesses which are doing really well, thankfully. I don't know why my slide keeps on doing that. So Watson today, which I never had any idea of what I wanted to be. I didn't realize until like, probably 2015, 2016 that I needed to grow up and like actually make this into something, and that is gonna be what I'm gonna try to do for the rest of my life. But the thing that I enjoy the most and where I think I do my best work is when I get to co-create with the business owners. And I get to help author their brand and their strategy and their business. And that's why we're a research-based creative studio, is that people are not coming to us just for a campaign. They're coming to us because they have a really big problem that needs to be solved. And that's different. So do I work with Nike every single day? No, we don't, because we're a small agency in Portland, Oregon. We're not going to be doing that. Who we do work with is kind of mid-market companies where we get to work with the C-level executives and help shape their business going forward. And then campaigning and stuff like that will come out of it. But that, to me, is the most attractive work. And also doing a diversity of work. So we really do 3 things. Every single client goes through some level of strategy. It's usually, at a bare minimum, about 3 weeks, if not 6 months. Of research that's really going in to define the problems, the issues, the consumers, the personas, the competitors. And then we do full service creative, and then we do activation. I think some of the things that we're most known for is obviously Nike and the sports story. So yes, we have worked with over 50 professional sports teams. I pinch myself that I got to fly out to New York and work on the Yankees website, or when the new Levi's Stadium was being built in San Francisco, we got to work with them on their entire digital presence. So sports is big. To be honest with you, I am bored by it, and I think that's one of the things I really love about my business is being able to take on all those different types of industries that make you uncomfortable. Also, I get to work with my alma mater, so I know this may not be the coolest thing for all of you, but for me and my son, to be able to see these photos come to life are pretty cool. So this is part of the photo shoot, and I'm back there catching the ball. We had, of course, had to superimpose it into his hand, but what we found is if he caught the ball, his stretch wouldn't be actually stretching. He'd be in here like that, and so we're like, okay, well, I'll get out there and catch the ball, and you stretch for it. That's how a little movie magic right there. But I just love the diversity work. Like the passion that my team puts in for a bowling alley, that's a pretty epic photo right there. That's Jeff, our videographer. or a crane company. That's a badass crane company there. Super cool. In Focus does overhead projectors, and with a jellyfish coming out of it. And then Umpqua Bank, I don't know if that's big out here, but it's definitely big on the West Coast. And boutique stuff. Beer, of course, beer in Portland, right? Law firms, bakeries, just fun stuff. Things I'm really proud of. Working with the Oregon Zoo Foundation. We just got done rebranding Oregon wine. That's one of my case studies. We redid the Oregon Ballet branding, and now I'm on their board, and I actually really like the ballet. We're right now rebranding the Autism Society of America, which is probably the most moving work we've ever done. The research and talking to these people, the families, the organizations across the nation, all these different chapters and the struggles they have of being a chapter of one or a chapter of, a couple hundred. So that's what Watson does. And kind of our mantra is diversity of work moves us, and that's where this exercise comes in. I know you can't see all the logos back there, but there's a bunch of logos. And I think that makes a happy staff. Makes the work interesting, right? Okay, so that's me. I got some case studies. What time do we have?
I was actually going to wrap this up and invite people to ask you questions afterwards, but I just want to say one or two things.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Thank you again, everybody, for coming out. I wanted to thank Matt Watson. This is one of our best presentations. And also, I would like to thank Adobe XD for sponsoring this luncheon and also giving us those cool hoodies and t-shirts. If you didn't grab one, there might be a couple back there left still. And Matt also has a lot of samples of his work out front if you want to check out a lot of his work, and he's going to be here for questions. But anyway, thank you so much. I hope to see you Thursday at our party at the Bulldog. Please come and party with us.
So I have time to take, clap, yay, there we go. I can take 3 questions, but I have a flight that I have to hit. Somehow my flight leaves at 1:55, so. Yeah, I know, it's close.
If you had one project you could go back and either retweak or...
Oh, don't get me started.
What would that one project be?
If I could redo it, Watson Creative. I wouldn't name it the same, and I wouldn't have started the same way. I feel very blessed to be where I'm at now, but it was hard, for sure. Yes, sir.
Whenever I was in middle school, the coolest thing you could have was a pair of Nike shocks made from Nike ID, but I can't ever remember seeing an ad. And I remember the Air Force ad with the Joel Santana song. But how do you disseminate that without, having such an overt ad presence?
There's a lot of people that say advertising's dead, right? So let me give you an example. If you go into retail and there's an $800 pair of jeans, doesn't that make you curious? Doesn't it make you pick it up, feel it, check out the brand, wonder what the heck this thing's all about? That right there is more powerful than advertising. It's marketing, right? But the jeans didn't cost $800 to make, or $400 or $200 or $100. It's a positioning. So those strategies, there's a variety of ways of curtailing traditional advertising and digital marketing as well. One more? Yes, sir.
So when you transitioned from Nike to your own, to Watson Creative, how many people did you start? Was it just you, and then you kind of organically?
Oh, it was just me, man. Yeah, I was just I was with my dad, and my very first client was In Focus. So it was a relationship from a friend at Nike that gave that to me, and I held that account for about 7 years until staff changed and stuff, which is normal. But it was a really good relationship. I started off charging I think like $65 an hour or something like that. and grew the relationship and used that to hire some interns in around 2013, some young designers and stuff like that. And then my second client was a construction builder, and I was renting office space from him, and I had 301 square feet off of Mississippi Avenue in Portland, and we got 9 people packed into that 301 square feet. He was like, you gotta go. But he was my first client. He gave me 3 referrals that year. That next year, those 3 referrals gave me 3 referrals each. And that's how the business grew. I didn't have a website, I didn't have a business card. I mean, as much as I say I'd like to redo stuff, I was doing something right. I just wish I had probably worked for one of the best agencies in Portland at that point before taking that leap. But I had no plan. And like I said at the beginning, I had named the company after myself. I didn't even think about it twice. I just needed a URL. Anyway, thank you guys. I appreciate it.